The handcuffs clicked shut around my wrists at 9:47 on a Tuesday evening, and the sound carried the full length of Maple Grove Drive the way sounds do on quiet residential streets after dark. Sharp, unmistakable, wrong. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had come out onto her porch with a glass of sweet tea frozen halfway to her mouth. The Delgado boys had abandoned their bikes on the sidewalk and were staring with the wide, unblinking attention that children give to disasters in progress. And Officer Derek Holt, badge number 4471, I memorized it before he had even finished fastening the second cuff, was pressing my wrists together behind my back with the smooth, practiced efficiency of a man who had never once, in the execution of this particular motion, paused to consider whether he had the right person. "You have the right to remain silent," he said. He was reading from the rote script of it, the words worn smooth by repetition, and he still had not looked at my face when he said them. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." He had no idea how perfectly true that was going to turn out to be. But that came later. All of it came later. Let me start from the place where it actually began, which was not the Tuesday of the arrest, and not even the week before it, but 6 weeks earlier, on an ordinary Thursday morning, when my life still had the solid, untroubled feeling of something that belonged entirely to me. I'd been a county judge for 11 years. 11 years of alarm clocks at 5:50, of case files spread across the kitchen table before the coffee finished brewing, of learning to wear stillness the way some people wear perfume, present in every room, consistent, part of the impression you make before you've said a word. The courtroom demands a particular kind of control, measured speech, neutral expression, the ability to hear something terrible and respond with reason rather than feeling. You either learn to carry that control everywhere as a permanent layer of yourself, or you leave it at the courthouse door and become a different person at home. I had long since stopped being able to separate the two. My husband David, 14 years, still the only person alive who could make me laugh until my lungs actually hurt, said I delivered opinions about the television news in the same tone I used to sentence people. He wasn't wrong. He said it with love. We lived in Fairhaven, a suburb that had been quietly diversifying over the past decade in a way that seemed to surprise certain of its longer-tenured residents, as if they had expected the changes to stop at the neighborhood's edge, and were still, gently, recalibrating. Our house was a Craftsman 4-bedroom on Maple Grove Drive. Deep front porch, oak tree in the yard that shed acorns every October, in quantities that felt like a personal grievance. Hydrangeas along the front walk that I deadheaded every Saturday morning with a coffee in my free hand. I had loved that house from the day we closed on it, and I had never stopped. I loved the specific weight of the key in my hand when I came home late. I loved the smell of the kitchen in the morning, coffee and cedar, and something warm in particular that I had never been able to name, but which was, I think, simply the smell of a house that is cared for by people who mean to stay in it. The SUV was a black Lexus R X350, 3 years old, bought outright, titled in my name. VIN. I could have recited from memory if asked. It sat in the driveway every morning when I left and every evening when I returned, as reliable as a full stop at the end of a sentence. I mention it because later, everything would hinge on it. But on that Thursday morning I climbed in, adjusted the mirror out of habit, and drove to the courthouse thinking about a scheduling conflict and a property dispute, and nothing else. The courthouse was a 20-minute drive through the older grid of Fairhaven, past the hardware store that had been there since 1962, past the diner where the county commissioners had breakfast every other Friday loud enough that the whole place could hear, past the parking garage where the Pigeons had established territorial claims on the third level that no supervisor had ever successfully contested. I parked in the reserved lot, said good morning to Gerald at the security desk. He always said, "Morning, Judge Carter," with a small, precise nod that I had come to think of as a form of respect between equals, and went upstairs to chambers. My clerk, Bree, was already at her desk, dark circles under her eyes behind enormous gold hoop earrings, a travel mug of peppermint tea steaming beside her keyboard. "Continuance request on the Alderman case," she said before I had fully removed my coat. "And your 12 o'clock wants to push to Thursday." I took the file from her hand and went into my office and sat down. And that was a Thursday. and that was the ordinary texture of my life. The Holt file was already in the Wednesday stack. I had glanced at it the previous week when Bree prepped the docket. A departmental misconduct proceeding, Officer Derek Holt, badge 4471. 3 complaints filed over 18 months by black motorists alleging racially motivated traffic stops, selective enforcement, and a documented pattern of detaining black drivers for extended periods without legal basis. The internal affairs hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. I would be presiding. At the time I flagged it, it was simply another case, another name, another stack of affidavits that would need to be heard with the same careful neutrality as every other case. I set the file aside and moved on to the alderman continuance. I thought nothing further about it. The first small thing I would remember much later came that same afternoon, at 12:42, when an unknown number called my cell phone while I was eating a sandwich over a juvenile delinquency file that made me sad in the specific, compressed way certain cases always did. The sadness of seeing the shape of something you cannot fix from where you're standing. I let the unknown number go to voicemail. No message was left. I finished my sandwich. I forgot about the call within the hour. The second thing happened on a Friday, 2 weeks later. I was pulling out of the courthouse parking garage at 6:15 when a patrol cruiser rolled slowly past the exit ramp. Slowly enough that I noticed it, not slowly enough that it was obviously deliberate. The officer behind the wheel glanced at my car, not at my face, at the car itself. I thought, plate reader. I thought, they're running vehicles. I thought nothing further and drove home. 3 days after that, the same cruiser, same unit number, I'd made a habit of reading plates without being conscious of doing it, was parked 2 houses down on the opposite side of Maple Grove Drive when I left for work at 6:20 in the morning. I clocked it the way I clocked anything out of place in a familiar landscape. A reflex, a note made and set aside. When I came home that evening, it was gone. I mentioned it to David over dinner, the way you'd mention a slightly odd dream. He set his fork down and frowned. That's strange, he said. We agreed it was probably unrelated to anything, finished dinner, and I spent the evening reviewing a moot court submission a professor friend had asked me to look at, and I went to bed. I should have understood then. Standing at the kitchen sink rinsing my plate, I had a single, formless moment where the back of my neck tightened, and I felt, with a clarity that had no specific object, that something was already in motion that I hadn't been told about yet. But the feeling had no name, no shape, and the kitchen was warm, and David was talking about something from his own day, and I let the water run over my hands, and I let the feeling pass. I dried my hands. I turned off the light. I went upstairs. That was the last ordinary evening for a long time. The arrest happened 6 days later, on a Tuesday. I'd stayed at the courthouse until nearly 9:30, a sentencing that ran long, then a phone conference that ran longer, then 20 minutes of notes I could have left for morning but didn't, because I almost never did. I was tired in the particular way of a day that had been composed almost entirely of other people's crises, their mistakes, their losses, the gap between what they had wanted their lives to be and what the evidence showed those lives to be. Instead, I was thinking about a bath and the book I'd been trying to finish for 3 weeks and nothing else. I turned onto Maple Grove Drive at 9:44. The street was quiet, the Delgado porch light was on. Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes were going in the warm September air, the same 3-note pattern they always made. I was 40 yards from my own driveway. The lights came on behind me, blue and red, filling the rearview mirror, turning the calm street into something that looked like the scene of a crime already in progress. The cold moved through me in one long, slow thread. Not panic. Nothing as dramatic as that, but the deep animal alertness that is older than thought. I pulled to the curb the way you are supposed to. Both hands on the wheel, visible. Engine off. I watched in the side mirror as the officer got out of the cruiser. He walked with one hand near his holster, unhurried, and I watched that hand, and I kept my breathing steady, and I waited. He stopped at my window. He did not crouch down. He stood above it, using the height, and he said, "License and registration." I reached for the glove compartment slowly, narrating the movement. "I'm reaching for the registration. It's in the glove box." I handed both documents up to him. He examined them. Something moved through his expression. A small, brief recalibration. A flicker of something that might have been surprise, that settled almost immediately back into blankness. He looked at me, then at the documents, then at me again. "Ma'am," he said, "this vehicle has been reported stolen." The words sat in the air between us for a full 2 seconds before they fully landed. My registration was in my name. My name was on the title at the DMV. I had driven this car to the same courthouse 3 days a week for 3 years. I said all of this, clearly and specifically, in the measured tone that 11 years on the bench had made second nature to me. "There must be an error in the system," I said. "My name is Simone Carter. This vehicle has been registered in my name since I purchased it 3 years ago. You can verify that right now against the VIN. I can also show you my insurance documentation, which lists the same name. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle," he said. "Officer, I understand there's a flag on the plate. A database error is a well-documented phenomenon, and I want to cooperate fully with resolving it. But this is my vehicle, and I'm asking you to verify." "Step out of the vehicle," he said again. He said it in exactly the same tone as the first time, same cadence, same finality, as if my words had been sound without meaning, ambient and irrelevant. Something went very cold and very still in my chest. Not fear, not entirely, but a recognition that was in some ways worse than fear. I looked at his face, the set of his jaw, the way he was not quite meeting my eyes, the way his hand had not moved from near his holster. And I understood with complete, awful clarity that this was not a mistake he was open to correcting. Not on this street. Not tonight. Not with me. I opened the door. I stepped out slowly. I kept my hands visible at chest height and my feet planted and my voice level as I told him, one more time, my name, my address, the fact that my driveway was visible from where we were standing. He told me he was detaining me pending verification of ownership. He took my arm, gently but with a firmness that made the gentleness meaningless, and he turned me toward the hood of my own car, and the handcuffs clicked shut, and the sound went down the street like a shot, and Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes kept going, and the Delgado boys didn't move, and a dog barked twice somewhere down the block, and then went quiet. The metal was cold. I remember that specifically, the cold of it. That was the detail that made it real in a way nothing before it had entirely been. Cold metal, the ratchet's click, the pressure at my wrists. I looked at the oak tree in my front yard, just visible against the darker sky, and I memorized badge number 4471, and I thought, this will be corrected. I did not think. This is the beginning of something. I did not know yet that it was. The processing at the station was efficient and impersonal in the way systems are when they have been built to move bodies through without requiring anything to recognize them as individual. A desk officer typed without looking up. A property bag was produced. My phone, my keys, my briefcase were cataloged and sealed. Officer Holt filed his report. Stolen vehicle, resisting arrest. I noted to the officer behind the desk, in a clear and conversational tone, that I had not resisted anything, that I had complied with every instruction while verbally contesting the legal basis for the stop, and that those were not the same thing. He gave me a look that lasted approximately 3 seconds. The look of a man who has heard many things in this room and has long ago learned not to carry them home, and went back to his keyboard. I was allowed one call. I called David. He picked up on the second ring, and I heard the television in the background, the 11 o'clock news, which he always watched when he was up waiting for me, low and murmuring. The sound of it moved through my chest like pressure. "Sim?" he said. "I'm at the Fairhaven police station," I said. "I'm all right. I need you to come." A silence. The television went quiet, muted or turned off. I could hear him stand up, the specific creak of the couch cushion releasing that I knew from 14 years of coming home late to find him there. "Don't say anything to anyone until I get there," he said. His voice was very quiet, very deliberate. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. "I know," I said. He was there in 12. He came through the station door looking the way he looks when he is managing something that he would rather be yelling about. Very still, very precise, the quietness of him like the quiet before a decision rather than after one. He spoke to the desk sergeant with a soft, almost courteous directness that I recognized immediately because I used the same register in the courtroom when I was about to say something that could not be taken back. "My wife is Judge Simone Carter," he said. "She's been incorrectly detained. I need to speak to whoever is in charge of this shift right now." The sergeant made a call. A lieutenant named Greer appeared within 4 minutes, heavy-set, pale, moving with the careful energy of a man navigating a situation whose boundaries he was still measuring. There was a conversation conducted in the lower registers of professional men trying to resolve something quietly before it became a thing that could not be resolved quietly. I heard fragments, system flag, database entry, clerical error. Greer came to me with an expression that had been carefully assembled into something neutral. "Judge Carter," he said, "we apologize for the inconvenience. There appears to have been an error in the vehicle registration system. A flag was entered incorrectly. You're free to go. Incorrectly entered." He said it the way you say something when you need the words to be small and unexamined. David's hand found my elbow. We walked out into the parking lot. The night air was warm and smelled of cut grass and exhaust, and the lot was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights under the canopy. David looked at me once, then at the road ahead, and he drove. We didn't talk on the way home. The streets were empty and lit orange, and the city had the still, slightly unreal quality of a place caught between one day and the next. When we pulled into the driveway, the oak tree was dropping acorns in the dark. I heard them hit the porch roof one at a time, slow and irregular. I unlocked the front door. The house smelled the way it always smelled, coffee and cedar and whatever the warm, unnamed thing was. For a moment it felt like comfort, and then I remembered the handcuffs, and the comfort had a crack in it. David made tea. We sat at the kitchen table across from each other in the specific quiet of midnight after a house has been disturbed, and he waited, because he knew me well enough to know I was organizing something. "It wasn't a database error," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. "A stolen vehicle flag doesn't appear on its own," I said. "Someone has to file a report. There's a date stamp, a time stamp, a badge number attached to whatever officer submitted it. Someone made a choice to enter my plate into that system." David turned his cup in his hands. Outside, another acorn hit the roof and rolled off into the dark. "Holt," he said, quietly. Not a question. I stood up from the table. I went to my briefcase. It had been returned to me at the station, everything sealed and accounted for. And I opened it, and I went through the Wednesday stack until I found the file I already knew was there. I set it on the table between us. The name at the top was printed in clean 12-point type. "Holt, Derek A. Officer, Fairhaven Police Department, Badge 4471. Internal Affairs Misconduct Proceeding. 3 complaints, 18 months, 4 black motorists. Hearing date, Wednesday, September 14th, 9 a.m. Presiding Officer, Judge Simone Carter." David looked at the file for a long time. He looked up at me. "He has a hearing in front of you," he said. "Tomorrow morning." "In 8 hours," I said. The refrigerator hummed its low, steady note. The acorns fell one by one. David's face did the thing it does when he has understood something that requires him to decide who he is going to be about it. A stillness that was different from his calm, denser, more considered. He looked at me across the kitchen table in the yellow light. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the file. I looked at badge number 4471. I thought about the cold of the handcuffs. I thought about Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes and the Delgado boys frozen on the sidewalk, and the way Officer Holt had not quite met my eyes when he turned me toward the hood of my own car. I thought about a lieutenant saying, "Incorrectly entered," in a voice designed to make a thing disappear. "I'm going to go to court," I said. "Same as I always do." I closed the file. I turned off the kitchen light. I went upstairs, and I lay in the dark for a long time, not sleeping, watching the ceiling and thinking about the morning, while the oak tree went on dropping acorns in the night outside, patient and steady and completely indifferent to what was coming. I was at my desk by 6:15 in the morning. I had not slept. Not truly. I had been horizontal in the dark for 5 hours with my eyes closed and my mind running like a machine that hadn't been given the instruction to stop. Around 2 in the morning I gave up, went to the kitchen, stood at the counter in the dark with a glass of water, and looked out at the backyard. The oak tree barely visible in the neighbor's faint yard light. The hydrangeas pale and shapeless at the fence. I stood there for a long time, not thinking in words. Thinking in the way that is more like sorting, putting pieces in order so you can see their actual shape. I had been a judge for 11 years. I knew the difference between a man who makes a mistake and a man who makes a choice. Derek Holt had made a choice. He had looked at his docket. He had seen my name above his case number. He had filed a stolen vehicle report against my plate and then gotten into a patrol car and waited for me on my own street. He had wanted me removed, or rattled, or afraid, or simply absent from courtroom 7 on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. I finished my water. I went back to bed. David was lying very still beside me, breathing the slow, deliberate way he breathes when he's trying to stay asleep so I won't feel guilty about waking him. Which meant he wasn't asleep at all. I put my hand over his. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "Sim," he said quietly. "I know," I said. "I'm calling Raymond in the morning. First thing." "Yes," I said. His hand turned under mine and held it. The house was quiet. The acorns had stopped falling. I was up at 5. I showered. I made proper coffee, the kind that takes 10 minutes, measured grounds, precise water temperature, because there was something in me that needed the ritual of it. I stood at the kitchen window while it brewed and watched the sky move from black to a deep, watered gray, and I thought about the 9 o'clock hearing with a clarity that felt almost like calm. It was not calm. It was the thing that lives on the far side of panic when you have passed all the way through it and come out the other end. Quiet, precise, extremely focused. I opened the Holt file and read it again from the beginning, not for the facts, which I knew, but for the architecture. 3 complaints over 18 months. The same structure each time. A black motorist, a traffic stop, a prolonged detention, a vehicle search without consent, a citation later dismissed in court. In 2 of the 3 cases, the drivers were women. In one of them, the woman was Patrice Cole, a nurse returning from a night shift still in scrubs. Holt had kept her on the side of the road for 47 minutes. He had told her, according to her affidavit, that her driving suggested impairment. Dashcam footage showed her doing 28 miles per hour in a 30 zone. I sat with both hands around my coffee cup and I thought, this is not about me. It has never only been about me. I was the 9th. The 9th person this man had decided to reduce to a vehicle and a skin color on the side of a road. I was the first one who would be looking at him from the bench when the clock hit 9. I called Raymond Osei at 7 sharp. He answered on the second ring, which told me David had already reached him. "Tell me what happened," he said without greeting. I told him everything. From the patrol cruiser I'd seen twice near the courthouse to the stop on Maple Grove Drive to the cold of the handcuffs to Lieutenant Greer and his careful phrase about things incorrectly entered. Raymond was silent throughout in the way lawyers are silent when they are hearing something and simultaneously filing its implications in a separate part of their mind. "The flag was entered when?" he said. "Saturday," I said. 4 days before the stop? Before or after he received the hearing notice? "The docket was published Thursday," I said. A silence that stretched and changed shape. "Simone," he said, "go to court, sit on that bench, do your job exactly as you always do. Let me handle everything else." "I'll see you at 8:30, I said. David had already pressed my blouse and set the iron away by the time I came downstairs dressed. He had done it quietly, without announcement, the way he does things he knows will matter. I put on the pearl earrings I wore for consequential days. I picked up my briefcase and the Holt file. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror for exactly 3 seconds, and what I saw there was not uncertainty. Raymond was waiting in the courthouse lobby at 8:27, immaculate, portfolio under his arm, with the contained, ready quality of a man who is prepared for a specific outcome and is willing to be surprised by a better one. He shook my hand. "The report," he said as we walked, "was filed through the online portal, badge number directly linked, Timestamp Saturday the 9th at 11:14 p.m. The hearing notice went out Thursday the 7th. He saw his name on my docket and filed a stolen vehicle report against my plate 48 hours later, I said. That is exactly what the documentation shows, Raymond said. And Internal Affairs has it now. I went upstairs. I put on my robe. I stood for one long breath in the quiet of my chambers, and I thought, 11 years. Not one day of which was given to me. I thought of Patrice Cole in her scrubs on the highway shoulder with her 12-year-old daughter silent in the back seat. I thought of the handcuffs cold on my wrists the night before. I let the breath out slowly and completely, and when it was gone, the stillness in me was total. "Tell them I'm ready," I said to Bree. She picked up the phone. I came through the courtroom door at 9 o'clock exactly, and I watched it happen in the way you watch something you have been waiting for without quite admitting you were waiting. The word that stopped in Holt's mouth mid-sentence. The blood that left his face. He was sitting at the respondent's table in his dress uniform. Pressed, polished. The presentation of a man who believed presentation would be sufficient. And when I came through that door and took my seat on the bench, he looked at me with the expression of a man who has calculated very carefully and discovered the calculation was wrong. I let the room settle. Then, "Good morning. We are here in the matter of the Fairhaven PD Internal Affairs Inquiry into Officer Derek Holt, badge 4471. Before we proceed, I need to address a preliminary matter." My voice was even, measured. The room was perfectly, attentively silent. Last evening, at 9:47 p.m., I was detained on Maple Grove Drive by Officer Holt on the stated basis that my vehicle had been reported stolen. I was handcuffed and transported to the Fairhaven police station, where I was held for approximately 90 minutes. The stolen vehicle report was entered into the system on Saturday, September 9th at 11:14 p.m. by badge number 4471. The docket for this morning's hearing was published Thursday, September 7th. I looked directly at Holt. "Internal Affairs has this morning received a formal request for investigation of potential witness intimidation and obstruction of proceedings. Mr. Holt, do you have anything to say for the record before we proceed?" The silence lasted a very long time. His attorney leaned toward him and spoke in a low, urgent tone. He didn't move. He was looking at the table in front of him. "No," he said. The word had no air in it. "Then let's proceed." The next 3 hours were not dramatic in the television sense. No shouting, no breakdown in the gallery. They were something quieter and more precise and, I thought, more appropriate. Mrs. Gloria Webb described being pulled over for a broken taillight that dashcam footage confirmed was not broken. Andre Sims described a 40-minute detention during which Holt had searched his car 3 times and found, ultimately, a gym bag and a library book. Patrice Cole described the night she came home from her shift in Scrubs and described her daughter in the back seat, 12 years old, who had not spoken for the duration of the stop and who had cried alone in her room later that night and who had not told her mother for 2 weeks. And then Raymond, calmly and without theatrics, placed before the panel a printout from the internal police database. Not just the Saturday night stolen vehicle entry, but 4 prior searches of my license plate by badge number 4471, beginning the same Thursday the docket was published. 3 more in the following 6 days. "This," Raymond said quietly, "is a record of surveillance." I heard the room shift, the particular way a room changes when a thing that has been half understood becomes fully understood. Captain Rourke made a note. The 2 oversight officers exchanged a look. Holt's attorney requested a recess. I gave her 15 minutes and went to stand at my chamber window with a glass of water, looking at the courthouse lawn below, and I felt very calm and very tired and very clear. The hearing concluded at 12:41. The panel's recommendation was filed by 4 o'clock, immediate suspension pending termination proceedings. Referral to the county prosecutor for review of the stolen vehicle report as a potential false police report filing. Referral regarding potential obstruction of judicial proceedings. Holt's badge and service weapon were collected at my bench by Captain Rourke himself in my courtroom. When it was over, Holt gathered his papers, picked up his cap, and glanced up at me once before he turned to go. I was writing a note in the margin of a separate file. I did not look up. After a moment, his footsteps moved down the gallery and through the door. Patrice Cole was the last to leave. She paused at the railing and looked up at me. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did this," I said. "You and Mrs. Webb and Mr. Sims. You made the record. I only had to read it." She nodded. She left. The courtroom was empty. I sat at the bench alone for one moment before I rose, in the specific quiet that follows a decided thing, while the afternoon light came through the high windows and made long bars of gold across the floor. 7 months later, I sat on the front porch on a Saturday morning with coffee and the newspaper, still physical because I liked the weight and the smell of the ink. The oak tree was bare after a cold February, but the hydrangeas along the front walk were showing their first green push of the season, tight and tentative. David was making breakfast inside. I could hear the particular clatter and ease of it. Holt's termination had been finalized in January. 3 weeks after that, he was charged with filing a false police report and misconduct in office. He would not work in law enforcement again. The civil suit filed by the 3 complainants settled in February. Patrice Cole had called me the day it was announced. Not to say anything in particular, she said. Just to close the loop. Mrs. Patterson came out onto her porch across the street and waved. I raised my cup to her. David appeared at the screen door with a dish towel over his shoulder. "Eggs are ready." "Coming," I said. I looked out at the yard one last moment. The acorns from October still lay at the base of the oak, small, scattered, patient in the dirt, waiting for what they were going to become. Then I picked up my cup and went inside. The coffee was still warm. For the first time in a long time, when I took that last sip, it tasted like exactly what it was supposed to be.